Hello YouTube and welcome, or hopefully welcome back to Old Maryland 63 C10, the channel that's dedicated to rebuilding of Hank, our 63 C10. Today is episode 4, and in today's episode we're going to be removing the cab. Well, thanks for sticking around. So I'm looking at the process of removing Hank's cab basically in two parts. That's why this video is actually going to be shot over a couple different days. The first part is building a cab dolly to be able to rest the cab on, and a jig to be able to attach to my engine hoist in order to lift the cab off of the frame. And then once those are done, we'll get actually started working on unbolting and removing all the pieces of the cab to be able to separate it from the frame. So the first part is building the cab dolly, so let's get started on that. So I want to start by showing my dolly and the jig to lift the cab off the frame using my engine hoist. So I started by taking a few measurements on the cab and looking at the assembly manual for the 60 to 66 trucks, and the frames are different again from 60 to 62, so was looking for the 63 to 66 frame. So as far as the cab goes, from side to side, the mounts across the back and I think the front are pretty close. It's about 42 inches, 42 and a half inches center to center, and then the edge of the frame mount is about 45 inches. From front to back, it's pretty close, around 45 inches as well. So to keep things pretty simple, I decided to make my cart, I decided to make my cart 45 inches square. So one leg will be 45, these 2x4s on this side would be 42 to end up being square. I wanted it to be about 25 inches tall, that way the cab would sit up above, I guess, my knee height. I'm thinking that would be pretty good. Again, this is the first one I've built, so we'll certainly find out. Just like the base that I have the bed sitting on, I'll have 4x4s at each corner for uprights and then dolly wheels on the bottom. So I did go with a different style of dolly wheel. These are 11-inch casters that I got from Harbor Freight, and the reason why I went with a bigger and pneumatic air caster is because the cab is going to get the most body work, repair work, and those kind of things. So I'm thinking if I had to roll it outside for either media blasting or lots of sanding and painting, all those things would be better outside of my garage. If I have to load it onto my trailer, again, to take it to do media blasting, if I decide to do that, I wanted something that would be easier to hopefully roll up on my trailer or at least roll outside of my garage. So the 11-inch casters also give me the height I want, because like on the bed dolly that I built, I wanted to be able to roll my engine hoist underneath of it in order to sit, in this case the cab, down on top of the dolly. I am going to use 2x4s across the top here because the frame mount, it's about a 3.5 inch height difference between the front cab mount and the rear cab mount. So I think I'm going to lay 2x4s across the top, lay the front flat on the 2x4, and probably pad up the back 2x4 in order to get the cab to sit level. Again, that's my plan. As far as the lift jig that I'm going to use to lift the cab measures roughly in the neighborhood of 64, 65 from the outside of the door jamb across the cab. So I'm going to make it 65 inches wide. 68 inches wide to add a little bit of cushion, and then the outside full dimension of it, because I'm going to have it capped off at the end with 2x material to be able to, in case the cab slides, to hopefully stop the cab. So it'll be a total of 71 inches wide. I need about 5 inches to clear the top of the brace of the arm. So we're going to drill our hole 5 inches below. That whole piece there will be 13 inches in order to be basically the fulcrum for it to sit on top of the engine hoist. I'll have bracing in between to kind of steady it up a little bit. It'll be a total of 8 3/8 inches wide when we add in the actual pieces and then the brace that's going to bolt to the engine hoist. I needed to leave 2 3/8 inches because that's my lift arm width, so that's the spacing in between there. I need about a 6-inch long bolt to get all the way through. One thing I am going to do, and again, this might be overkill, I'm not sure if it's something I exactly need, but I'm going to offset this hole about 1 inch one way further to one side. And I'm going to use that to hopefully, might put a little bit more weight towards the back of the engine hoist lift where I'll be, standing and working it, just in case it gets off centered. I don't know if I need that or not, but we're gonna try it and see what happens. Okay, so here's our dolly. I do need to add more bracing to it, which I will do to kind of square it up and keep it a little bit more solid than it is. I'll probably also run some bigger screws into the sides to be able to, again, just make it a little bit more steady. Dolly, so let's get started on the jig to put on the engine lift to lift the cab. Okay guys, well there she is. I have to say, she's an ugly beast. I'm not sure I'm real confident in this build. Sometimes I guess if you use crappy lumber, you end up with a crappy result. So we'll see. Had a little bit of heck of time to get everything lined up, but hopefully this will work out okay. I have more confidence in the dolly, but we're gonna find out. Our bracket or braid or whatever you can call it, jig, only has to work twice really, off and on. So let's hope it works out. So next step is starting to work on breaking down the cab. Okay, so now that the dolly is finished and the jig is finished, it's time to start working on the cab. So the first thing we're gonna do is remove the doors. That'll make it obviously easier to get the seat, to get a couple other things out of the inside of the cab. And obviously the jig's gotta go inside the cab without the doors on it to be able to pick it up. So we're gonna start with the doors. I've seen a lot of people, they'll drill a pilot hole through the hinge into the sheet metal as an alignment tool. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not sure if they re-weld the holes closed. They probably do, or they put seam sealer in or something. I'm not exactly sure, but I don't think I wanna commit to drilling a hole through into the cab through the door hinge. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a scribe and I'm gonna scribe around all the hinges and then start to take the bolts out. Again, hopefully putting this all back together in big pieces. The doors are pretty well aligned now. They're not off by too much. Certainly for what my plan is with the truck, the gaps are fine. So I'm just gonna try to get them back to these scribe marks. So let's scribe all the way around and then we'll start taking bolts out. Okay, as we move to the top, we'll take two of them out, leave that last one in there to way to kind of hold it so I can get it loose, take that last bolt out, grab the door at the same time, and hopefully not have it hit the floor of the garage. We need to get a bigger wrench. Okay, so we got the doors off and I slid the seat out. It wasn't even bolted in. I didn't put that on camera because it was a little awkward getting that seat out by myself. And again, it wasn't even bolted down, so it kind of just slid right on out. So next thing we're gonna do is start working on the items in the cab. Getting the shifter off, getting the e-brake disconnected, and start working on getting the steering column out because I'm gonna take the column out so that the steering shaft isn't sticking out. So for the shifter handle, you just supposedly push down on this little cup on the top here, and it's held in place by these pins, and it should, oh, there she goes. Just like that. So we're going to take the shifter out and we're going to leave that right here, and that'll go back in the transmission once we lift the cab off. I think this is just nothing but a gasket here, and hopefully that'll just pick up with the cab. I'm not going to worry about scraping that off right now. So let's get started on things underneath of here. I'm going to move the camera a little bit so hopefully you can see. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the emergency brake off. As you can see, I'm not sure that was doing a whole lot, so we're going to pull that cable through. Okay, so now that we got the e-brake out of the way, pulled the cable through, just put the bracket back up here to hold into it, put the nuts or the bolts back in here just to hold on to them. We'll package all this up and put it in a box and put it inside the cab to store. So the next is the steering column. So wiring, we'll pop that loose. It looks like it's 2 bolts here on either side of the column, and it looks like I'm missing one, but 3 small 5/16 bolts down here at the firewall that look like that might hold that gasket on. So we're going to go ahead and break those loose. We'll pull the ones out at the top here because it'll just rest on the bracket that's holding the clutch and brake pedal. So we'll go ahead and get these apart, and then we'll move to the outside of the truck. Let's get these, look like these are, yeah, they're loose enough. Let's put this up here. So let's move to the outside of the truck and start getting the couple pieces off there. Okay, so it looks like it's 2 pieces left to go to hopefully get the steering column out. There's a clamp up here, and of course where it attaches down here to the steering box. So let's get the clamp off first. Well, that proved to be a little bit more of a challenge than I expected, so my lesson learned for everyone else to get the steering column out. I didn't take the steering wheel off, and I'm sure it probably would have been a lot easier without the steering wheel on because I couldn't pull it straight enough back to pull it out of the cab. So another thing that needed to come off was actually the bracket that is holding the steering wheel up to the clutch pedal assembly. So this has your brake light on it, or for your brake switch. And I originally thought I'd be able to sneak it up in between there, but it wasn't coming out. So this had to come out. And then once I got the steering column to the back of the cab, I actually had to pull the clutch pedal all the way to the top of its clearance. Again, without the stop there, it was able to pull up high enough that I could get the column underneath of it, and then I could twist it out the door to pull it the rest of the way. I will need a new rag joint on it, but I realized that this, wasn't really the problem. It was, well, this wasn't going to come through the hole in the firewall. You had to be able to cock it sideways, get one side through, turn it, and then bring it the rest of the way out. So it's out. I will definitely rethink this, putting it back in. Again, when you guys go to do yours, take off the bracket that's between or right there with the clutch pedal and the brake pedal. Take the steering wheel off. Would probably make it a lot easier, but it's out. Now we're moving on to the rest of the things that are on top. So let's get the rest of that stuff off, and then hopefully we can get to pulling the cab. So now I think we're pretty much at the final phase, and that's getting the cab unbolted. I did unbolt the other side, which is the driver's side. I'm now on the passenger side. But while we're underneath it here, I just wanted to show a couple things on why this truck, I was really happy to get this truck. These cab braces underneath here are in great shape. I don't think there's any need to dig around in those when putting them back together. I'm sure there's probably some gunk in there with that hole. I will try to clean out some of that stuff. But this is the back one. And just to pan around to the front one, the front cab brace is just as good. I really got lucky with these cab braces, and really the inner rocker as well. So let's go ahead and knock these couple bolts out on this side, and hopefully we'll be able to get these out without too much of a problem, and we'll be ready to lift this cab off. Okay, now the front one on the driver's side was a little bit more stubborn. I guess in some ways it was good. It was kind of rusted in because I didn't need to hold a wrench on the nut, or I'm sorry, at the bolt at the top. I was just able to get it off from this nut on the bottom. But then I had to drive it the rest of the way out, which again is fine because it helped me out because it actually was frozen into the cab bushing. So let's see if we can get the front one off. So as clearly as those braces are in good shape, there's plenty of Texas dust that came out. So I will try to figure out some way to either vacuum that out or clean it out some way so that any moisture that does get in there won't hopefully rust them. But you can see it's got some Texas dirt in it. So let's pull that bolt out of the top, and I think we'll be ready to get the cab off. So here's where we are. We've got the cab down on the dolly. These were the 2x4s that I'd mentioned in the build that I was going to try to space it off the dolly a little bit. Right now we've got about a 3-inch gap here in the back. The cab's sitting fairly level, but I'm not real happy with the way the cab brace that runs back and front underneath the cab is sitting on the 2x4. So I'm going to put a couple spacers back here to hopefully lift the cab up slightly so that it rests more on the front cab mounts than it does on the cab brace that runs front to back. It's hanging out a little bit further behind the cart or the dolly than I kind of expected, but I want to get these spacers in here first just to see how it sits, and then if we need to lift it up a little bit and bring the cart back, at least I know I'll have it flat. So I'm going to hopefully cut some of these spacers, and hopefully that'll help us out a little bit. Okay, we've got the cab on the dolly. It's sitting pretty square. It's not quite level, but it is sitting flat on the brace that goes, again, the front brace that comes down the front of the cab and goes to the back of the cab. So I'm pretty happy with that. So let's get cleaned up and we'll come back and talk a little bit about some mistakes I made and some things I do different to help you guys maybe avoid some of the pitfalls that I did. Well, first I want to say thanks for sticking around. For those of you that made it all the way to the end of the video, I appreciate it. I know this video was a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be because between building the dolly and the jig and then finally getting the cab up on the dolly. So I appreciate you sticking around. If this helped you at all, please click the like and subscribe button. That would be great. So 4 pointers, I guess, or 4 things that I would probably do different that might help you guys when you do your build. First off, I would remove the steering wheel. Probably the majority of the time, or at least the most time I took, was getting the steering column out of the cab. And that would have been a lot easier if I had removed the steering wheel. It probably would have came out without having to get it around the pedals and everything else. So I would recommend doing that. It'd probably save you time in the long run to be able to pull the steering wheel off. I would definitely make my dolly a little bit bigger. It's sitting on the dolly fine. I would have liked to have a little bit more cushion where I have the 2x4 sitting on top of the dolly. So if you go back to my measurements earlier in the video, I would add a couple inches. And again, full disclosure, so you know where I made a mistake to hopefully help you. I couldn't get my engine hoist out from underneath the dolly between the wheels. Wasn't any big of a deal. I did just have to pull one of the legs off the engine hoist and it came out. But again, just to save you that little bit of effort, make your dollies a little bit bigger. Again, I think mine was 45 inches square. I might go 47 or something like that. Again, just to give a little bit more play. I have Harbor Freight pneumatic tires on this. I've already had to put air in them. I would have probably bought, if I had to do it again, solid tires. I'm hoping they won't completely go flat, or I just have to put a little bit of air in them to move it around. It's going to sit obviously for a while we do other parts of the truck, but I probably would have bought a solid caster instead of the pneumatic ones. I also offset my jig, if you remember from earlier in the video, to be able to get a little bit of the weight leaning back towards where the hoist would be and where I would be. So in case I had to, control it a little bit more, I probably didn't have to do that. If you noticed in the video when I got the cab up, it tilted pretty far to the driver's side where I was. Now that did help in getting it over the transmission, over the frame and off. But when it came time to sitting it on the dolly, it was really lopsided. I had to kind of pick it up, get the dolly underneath of it to even begin to start to lower it down. So I would say you don't need to offset the jig in order to get the weight back to you because again, this thing tilted pretty far. The fourth, no, that was 4. So take off your steering wheel, bigger dolly, solid tires, don't offset your jig. So again, thanks for sticking around. Our next video would start on the chassis, so I hope you come back and see us then. Thanks a lot.